Let me just start with the badge very quickly. This is one of the creators of the badge. I think we have an online version.
It now comes out about every 2 months. We post it on our website. The last one that came out January and February, I emailed out to the group, and we'll do so every time we post a new one. I will email you the PDF version, as well as send you the link to the website.
And if you look at the current one that is online, there's two stories related to the PACER report in there. You'll see lots more content coming up through there. So I hope that's helpful.
Just to ask you, is the badge being printed?
Pardon?
Being printed and
No, it's not. Well, we print limited copies, but we only distribute the hard copies internally that we have.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You want to know about the number of missing persons? I don't have that number. If you're talking about missing persons here locally in Toronto, we could probably find that number for you and get back to you. There are many active cases that are ongoing, but probably we're looking for the longer-term missing persons, unsolved cases, I'm assuming. We'll try to get back to that. Hate crimes, yes, we saw a horrendous hate crime south of the border on the eve of Passover. Certainly the early indications that I'm only getting this through media and social media, so it's not from any inside source. So I'm not giving you any secrets that you couldn't find out on your own. But certainly the appearance of the motivation for that horrendous series of shootings and killings appears to be hate-related. And if it can happen in a major city south of the border, then we cannot be complacent that something like that couldn't affect any one of our minority or religious communities north of the border. We have a hate crimes unit with some of our best investigators attached to our intelligence squad. They have international relationships, and so they are keeping a track and abreast of hate-related issues on the internet, crimes being committed around the world, and particularly crimes happening within the North American context, to see whether or not there is any relationship to suspects or activities here in Toronto, or could have copycat or carry-on effects here in Toronto. As of right now, we haven't had any alerts from our intelligence division that connects to the events that happen south of the border. Every year, the Toronto Police puts together a hate crime report for the Toronto Police Services Board. That becomes a public document, and there are archived hate crime reports on the Toronto Police Board website if you want to get historical information. In terms of active terror cells, clearly a city of this size, we have a relationship with our federal policing partners, our international policing partners. We monitor activities that are either happening here or could have an impact here, including terror-related activities. I'm pretty sure that you have seen the effectiveness of that by the investigations and prosecutions that have taken place most recently. The group that was planning to blow up the railway lines, the Toronto 18 and others. We've been blessed to get in the city that we have not become the subject of a major terror attack here, but clearly we have a city this size where we're located. There are activities that go on, and we work very closely with our policing partners, but more importantly, we work very closely with our local immigrant and minority communities. And everything that I've learned about not just crime prevention, but the prevention of terrorism, is working with local communities to make sure that our young people are focused on the right things, and that where there are issues simmering, that we have as early a warning and we're able to do something as proactive and as preventative as possible. And I do believe that it's the local relationship that we have through our ethnic media and our ethnic communities with the local police that is one of the main reasons why so far we have been able to avoid the worst elements of terrorism, international terrorism as it relates to this city. And we don't take any of that for granted.
Mark from Polo News.
There is a big change from the Mexico, Canada, and Senator Hayas. He was in 1972 the first minister of multiculturalism. So it's evolved from the white and the culture into the multiculturalism. So, but he was the first Polish Canadian, so I'm proud that we are contributing to this government.
Thank you very much for that contribution. I wasn't aware of that historical fact. Thank you.
But practically, are we doing the studies of anthropology like for the groups? Because there is dynamics for Canada for the immigration. We don't have the natural birth as a source of the growing they have the tradition that we were not working. We are coming here, so they are doing a lot of problems. But how are you going to address this, like to understand what is how to apply the law? And another thing with the young generation, like Polish people like to drink vodka. And the young generation, Canadians, are using drugs. So this is I don't want to be something racist, whatever, but the black people offer me drugs. The Polish people offer me vodka. So now there is a culture in the distribution of the drugs. And this is the schools, even the small kids are using. So how we are going to address this? That this is the drugs are going into the society.
Yeah, so let me do my best. There's a number of big areas there. Cameras. I remember doing a bit of research back about 10 years ago, and there was a study done out of the UK, London, that looked at the level of trust in policing in Western Europe and North America. They studied over a 10-year period from the mid-90s through to the conclusion of the report around the mid-2000s. And what they found is that year over year, in every part, with very few exceptions, every part, trust was going down. The effectiveness of police was going up. There was less crime. There was more of a visible professional police presence. And crime was going down. But the level of trust in police and the level of fear was going up. So trust was going down, fear was going up. And they called it an inverse relationship. When they applied the same study to women, the minorities, new immigrants, they found that the level of trust was even further down and the level of fear was even further up. And they call that the optimism gap. So clearly in the industry of policing, although we're doing a better job of reducing crime and victimization, although policing has been professionalized to a greater degree over the last 20 years, the issue of trust and fear are still major issues. Now, if we just stop the policing and go, well, that's a failed institution, you guys are, if you were a private industry, you'd be out of business. The fact of the matter is, in that same time frame, trust in almost every single public institution was going down as well. Politicians were trusted less, teachers were trusted less, economists were trusted less. And if you were really honest, your neighbors and your family members were trusted less. As a young boy growing up in Jamaica, childcare and parenting was you got us up in the morning and fed us breakfast, you let us out the front door and we ran around all over the place and we came back home and we were hungry. And then we went back out again, and we never worried about where our kids were. I don't know about you, if there's any young parents in the room, but I don't let my child out of my line of sight. And if for a moment she's out of my sight, I panic, thinking that she's been kidnapped and she's going to be molested and murdered. And so the issue of whether or not the police should be wearing body cameras is not so much whether or not it's a trust about the policing institution. Clearly there is a trust issue. Trust in society has deteriorated so much that nobody trusts anyone. And that's why everybody walks around with one of these. And so whether or not we put a camera on a police officer, it doesn't really matter because there's a camera on a police officer everywhere all the time anyway. And so to a degree we're keeping up with two trends in society. The trend to lose the loss of trust in everyone and everything, and the trend that cameras are everywhere, on everything, on all the time. And so I tell my police officers, don't worry about whether or not we trust you or not. There's an issue of trust. Don't worry about whether or not you're on a camera. You're on a camera all the time. So just do the right thing all the time, and you won't have anything to worry about. I talk about the issue of anthropology and whether or not any different race uses a different particular crime. I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an academic. I'm a cop. And so I don't feel qualified to speak on any of those areas. What I can tell you, having done policing in this city, and having done policing around the world, and visited most of the major police agencies in North America, and most of the best in Europe, the issues that we're talking about are issues common to every society. Drugs and alcoholism, crime and violence. Every different community has some problem or some issue. None is better than any other. It's called human nature. We all have isms, we all have bias, we all have heroes, and we all have zeros. And I don't bother trying to work my brain into a pretzel to figure out who's better or worse. I just assume everybody deserves basic human rights and respect and safety, and I do my best to the little piece of the puzzle that I control to provide that in my personal life and my professional life. That's the best way I can answer your other two questions.
After the Bogosian, I have a couple of questions. First, with regards to grow-ups, we used to have sort of a list of properties that is used by criminals, and this information on the directory is not in existence anymore, if I may say so. There was a occasion that I approached the police station of the area, and these officers didn't know much about what was going on in my house in the few months prior to that date that they were put in off for that. My question is basically, do you have internal or available to the public any list of grow-ups, and whether that is available for?
Yeah, we made a very conscious decision not to create those lists. There are other police agencies in Ontario, I believe one or two in the GTA that publish their lists. Maybe you correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe we've ever come up with a public list. I can't tell you all the reasons for that decision. That decision predates this chief, but I can tell you the reasons that we've talked about most recently. I can understand there might be a public value in the posting of lists where there are grow-ups, where there's been a crack house, where there's been a prostitution ring running out of private property or a private home. There is some usefulness in doing things like that. But there's also a social cost. When you do that, you stigmatize, you identify the property, but you may stigmatize the people that live or work at that property who had nothing to do with the crime that was going on in the property. You then have the radiating effect of stigmatizing the broader neighborhood and the broader community. There are communities that have a disproportionate amount of crack houses and grow-ups and houses where there are body rub parlors, and other illicit activities. And adding on public scrutiny and media scrutiny on top of their challenges, we have got feedback that the people in those communities would see that as a greater cost and a greater value. And we believe that that's the more wise approach. Certainly when we lay charges against grow-ups, when we lay charges and bring people to court for marijuana production or trafficking, it's a matter of public record. And so if the media or any other entity wanted to find out more information about the location of those crimes, there are avenues, legitimate avenues that they could go and find it. But the police publishing the addresses, we feel that that would do more harm than good in the delicate balance of trying to build trust and build confidence and pride in some of the neighborhoods that we've been talking about here tonight. But I do recognize the issue. It's not an easy one. We've tried to find the most wise way to deal with that issue.
Sir.
We've been getting media attention on police shootings. I guess police are now expected to be psychiatric mental nurses, psychiatric nurses. Why is that? And why is the police not fighting back and saying, look, that it's totally ridiculous? So what is going on?
One of the most difficult things that an officer has to face out there is dealing with someone who is in a state of emotional disturbance. It could be something related to the consumption of drugs or alcohol. It could be something in relation to a clinically diagnosed state of mind. It could be just heightened stress at a particular period. Or it could be all three of those things and a few others. But it is one of the most difficult, dynamic, and dangerous instances for both the police officer and the member of the public who is in emotional crisis and the members of the public who are in and around those instances. We have in this city over 10,000 such instances every year where we are called to or come across people in emotional crisis. The vast, vast majority of those incidents are handled without any media attention, any use of force, and any tragic circumstances. Fortunately, a handful of them every year do come into that point of crisis where people are injured, sometimes the officers, many times members of the public, and in even fewer of those cases where the member of the public loses their life, and we have had officers who've lost their life in those instances. I say that to give some sense of proportionality. Our officers are well trained, they're dedicated, and they're caring, and although they're not psychologists or nurses or trained medical practitioners, they're decent human beings and good professionals, and they do the best they can, and they get the best results in the vast majority of those instances. But like most things, it's those few that go terribly wrong that get the media attention. The second part of the comment I want to make is that the founding fathers of the last 50 or so years decided to deinstitutionalize the practice of mental health. And for many good reasons. There were horrendous human rights atrocities and bad medical practice that were taking place in hospitals and mental institutions around Canada. And there was a huge hue and cry and advocacy in the same way that the black community and the minority community has advocated very assertively and very righteously around the issue of racial profiling. The mental health community, mental health survivor community, has been equally committed in changing the systems that were not helping them. And so people wiser than me 40 and 50 years ago said, look, we need to change the way we do this business. And we're going to deinstitutionalize this process. We're going to close the hospitals, and we're going to put people back in the community, and we're going to create community-based healthcare processes. Well, they got it right on two of them. They closed the hospitals, and they put people back into the community. But they did not create an infrastructure within the community to help those people. And so they closed the hospitals, they did not open anything else. And basically, it's teachers, and parents, and not-for-profit organizations and police officers who are not trained, equipped, or funded to deal with these people in crisis that are now the frontline mental health workers. That is not a sufficient system. It's certainly not sufficient for the police. It's not sufficient for anybody else that I know. And so I think we are being confronted now in North America, probably around the Western world, with the issue of increased instances of mental health. Not just clinical diagnosis, but the stress of living in poverty and marginalization, the stress of displaced persons, the stress of being a new immigrant, the stress of the economic downturn have created much more mental health incidents. There are studies coming out of the States that say there are more clinically diagnosed people in jail than there are criminals. And the corrections facilities personnel aren't trained for that either. And the rehabilitation programs that are in there have no ability to address these issues of mental health. It is a major health crisis, and it is becoming a major safety crisis. And the police never held their hands up as a solution. We don't hold ourselves out as a solution. And in fact, many see us as part of the problem. And we don't disagree, but we don't have an alternative right now. So when you call 911, we'll come and we'll do the best we can. And in the vast majority of those instances, the best things happen. But they are tragedies waiting to happen, and all too frequently they do happen. Now there are cases that we get it very horribly wrong. I'm not going to defend those cases. Those cases are before the courts, and I can't comment on them. But the vast majority of our cases, our officers do the best job they can, and society needs to do a better job for the increasing number of people that are suffering from mental illness and mental stress.
Mila Garcia from